Ing drawbridge at dawn, vows at high tide. My name is Eli, and I lift a street out of the way when water insists on being first. I'm a bridge tender on the North Channel, the kind of job that sounds invented until you see the red lights halt a morning and the roadway break neatly along its seam. The span I babysit is older than both of us, steel trusses that learned humility from salt, rivets that remember grammar better than politicians. My console is a museum, two levers fat with fingerprints, a panel of buttons no one has the heart to replace, a phone that rings with voices that think they're the river. On paper, the job is procedures and tied tables. In practice, it's attention without applause. I carry a coil of keys on my belt like a clumsy chorus, a tied book my father shaded with thumbprints, and a habit of counting gulls when nothing needs me. I live with Ryan. He cooks on the ferry that crosses our channel 12 times a day, breakfast into lunch into rumor into dinner. He comes home dusted with flour like somebody had second thoughts about erasing him and started over. He keeps a notebook of knives. Which one is moody? Which one lies? Which one thinks it's a violin bow? Our apartment faces the slip where the ferry sighs against its lines, a rectangle of green water that pretends to be patient. On the fridge, we keep a magnetized notepad titled, say, In Daylight, because we promised not to invent truths after midnight. Some mornings, it's the only thing in the kitchen still doing its job. The Tuesday when the tide and my certainty both felt complicated, I was halfway through my first opening. A tug and two barges had called at once, the kind of choreography that makes drivers think we're conspiring with the ocean. I keyed the horn, flashed the ambers, watched the crossing arms lower. There is a mercy in mechanical certainty, and tugged the lever toward up. The span lifted like a sentence remembering its verb. The tug passed, the barges complained in vowels, and I set the bridge back down as gently as a word you intend to keep. I logged the time, the vessel, the direction, then pulled out my phone to text Ryan a joke about breakfast sausages marching like obedient tugboats. That was when the joint email we use for deliveries blinked across the lock screen. Thank you for your stay, Harborview Hotel. Time, 12:093:01. Points, 200 added. I didn't call. Our rule for anything that isn't yet a disaster is 2 loops around the block before nomming it. My block was the walkway that skirts the tender house, 100 steps of steel grate that judge your souls by their honesty. I walked it twice, nodding to the bronze plaque for some mayor who claimed he cut a ribbon but didn't lift a thing. The wind said the only sentence wind knows. You already know. Ryan came home smelling like coffee that had learned its lesson, like sea salt that wasn't trying to prove anything. He set a bundle of fairy napkins on the counter because they were drifting to the floor in his pocket, kissed the air, then my cheek, then the scar on my forearm where a winch and I met as equals. The third kiss is always the calibrated one with him, and saw the notepad flip to its blank side. I held out my phone as if it were a glass of water I wasn't sure he wanted. He didn't audition confusion. Yeah, he said, resting his palm on the back of a chair like he trusted wood more than language. The galley prep room was booked. The purser moved the tasting earlier. The dock master suggested a daytime room at the Harborview. I went, with Marco. Marco is a photographer who can convince steam to pose. Ryan admires him loudly and often. We worked, he said. It felt good to be possible under a light I didn't hang. There are currents you respect because they're not yours. We need a clear table, I said. Tonight, no phones, no metaphors sharp enough to cut. I have a habit. I turn fear into furniture. I pulled the task lamp from the bookshelf to the little maple table by the window, laid a square of plexiglass on top, slid a short string of battery lights under it that refused to take sides, and taped a clean sheet of paper over the glow. On it I wrote, in the block letters I learned from signs, clear table, one truth, one want, no asterisks. Ryan set both palms on the paper. My truth, he said, voice like a whisk between stages, is I liked being looked at like I was still becoming. My truth, I said, choosing verbs like bolts, is I'm not afraid you slept with him. I'm afraid you'll write the final menu somewhere I can't read it. My want, to want you now, not the future exhibit of your competence. My truth, he said, is I want to be seen when I'm still dough and guesswork, not just when the crust forgives. My want, that you want me halfway, fingerprints and all. We added a rule to the fridge, 1 hour without screens each night and a post-it on the table before we brushed our teeth. The first week looked like a row of modest sentences, kiss me without captions, say no without a recipe. Hotel emails stop at the door, and then the hotel wrote again. Double points all month. Marketing is a metronome that doesn't listen to rhythm, only counting. I hid in work. I walked the tracks at dawn with a wrench in one hand and superstition in the other. I pulled and reseated the main signal relay until its contacts remembered the gospel of clean. I crimped a lug like it owed me honesty. I replaced a limit switch on the south leaf, the one that thinks its job is to be dramatic. Between tasks, I wrote on a scrap, remember water, not the kind we lift for boats, the kind you drink when grief makes your mouth loud. That night Ryan wrote on the table, I want to be able to tell you when I like something that isn't you. I wrote, I want to offer you more than reprimands. Smaller, I want to offer more than apologies. Days pretended to behave. A kid on a scooter stopped at the approach and asked if bridges have birthdays. I said yes, but we measure them in paint. A woman in a hatchback asked if I could open just a little. I told her the river doesn't do fractions. A gull dropped a mussel precisely where a maintenance manual would have put it if the manual had a sense of humor. I came home to find Ryan tapping gray paper to the wall like he was installing better weather. Sunday, he said, let's take the commuter ferry to the outer beach. Arbitrary day, late return. I said yes like a person grateful for a declared holiday. We went, 2 hours of noise that owned no one. On the beach I thought restricted speed, laughed at myself and let my instruments be wrong. We ate a sandwich too salty and then another humbler. Back home he wrote, I want to be there when you congratulate yourself. I wrote, I want to congratulate you without checking the lever positions first. It felt like both a joke and a maintenance note. The magazine that hires him offered a 3-day micro-residency in a new studio with concrete that pretended to be warm. Hotel included. I want to go for the work, not the hotel soap, he said. I also want to prove I know how to come back. Protocol. Nightly voice memo. Morning I'm here, no poetry. He left with a reasonable backpack, a shirt I forgive the world for, and a single-serve citrus soap whose label was nicer than it meant. I lived like a bridge after a storm, orderly, alert, one bad idea from a jam. The second night I went to the bar under the overpass where a very old pianist plays slow tangos for people polite enough to deserve them. He leaves on purpose, a one-breath lag at the end of phrases, like room for mercy. I applauded and left a tip that looked like an apology and felt like a seal cut and replaced correctly. Voice memo 1. The room doesn't smell like anything, it's almost sad. Voice memo 2. I'm here, plus a blurry photo of a white wall that breathed better than we had. Voice memo 3 didn't come for hours. I rearranged the apartment like I was hunting a frequency. Jealousy has the mechanics of a stuck latch. Then a text. I'm making my no. I told them I have someone. I said I'm not interested in being profitable for anything else. He came back. He set the melon-scented soap on the console. Drawer for things we laugh about without getting hurt, I asked. Drawer, he said. On the table he wrote, let's learn something useless together. We tried whistling in two parts. Catastrophe first, then a narrow miracle, 30 seconds of overlap without envy. Two lines agreeing to carry the same current for a difficult inch. I don't want to be heroic, I want to be exact. Some evenings I open the archived hotel email the way you tongue a repaired tooth. Some mornings Ryan comes home with a light I don't recognize. I can see the day tuned his frequencies. Sometimes the table looks like a bric-a-brac held together by tape. Sometimes a music stand waiting for breath. We sit. We talk low. We let our hands do nothing. Yesterday, a developer with a blazer, the color of wet concrete, suggested I leave the bridge closed 5 minutes longer each opening to improve vehicular throughput. He said throughput like an apology to a spreadsheet. I told him the river doesn't clock in for his convenience and that the Coast Guard has opinions. He smiled in a way that made me respect paint. On my break, I watched a couple argue by texting. Their faces were quiet and their thumbs shouted. On our block, an old man asked if the lift was safe. "Better today than yesterday," I said. "I'll keep it that way." He nodded like I'd handed him a handrail. On my way home, I texted Ryan. "I don't want all your notes so I can own them. I want to know them so I can recognize them." He replied, "Then look." The right way to tell a man who talks with his hands that his hands are a language. I ducked into a hardware store that smelled like competence and bought a strip of small blank tags. This morning the hotel tried again. "Last chance to double your points." I clicked change address and typed hours. I taped 3 tags along the bottom edge of the table and wrote on them in block letters, ME, US, today. Ryan put his hand flat on the paper. "One truth, one want, no asterisks," he said. My truth, I still want to be looked at like I'm a draft. My want, that you look at me like I'm always becoming. My truth, I said, is that I'm afraid of silence but less than yesterday. My want, to kiss you now, even if our hands smell like shellac and electricity. The little lights under the plexi flickered as if agreeing. A freight eased past without making the pigeons do anything they didn't want to. Somewhere a substation hummed its old yes-no and meant both. The river raised its polite shoulder and let a tug through. And the switches of the city, if you'll believe me, decided for one night only to line themselves without complaint.